guys, I feel like I'm starting to grow a little bit tired of Riftbound. There it is, it's out now, I can't hide it anymore. But I want to preface this by saying that this video is in no way meant to hate on the game or anything. Quite contrary, there is a lot I love about this game and a lot that Riot has been and keeps doing right. Yet, I've thought quite a bit about this, and this feeling just starts creeping up more and more. So I feel like we have to talk about it, and maybe we learn something about how to mitigate this along the way. Maybe there are people out there who feel similarly and can provide some of their input to this as well. But yeah, let's just get into it. And let's start by getting, well, kind of a more personal issue out of the way, which is that in my private life there has been a lot going on, which just meant I couldn't really attend Nexus nights or skirmishes or whatever. The last thing I played, I think, was the Unleashed pre-release. As those events like aren't super close to me, I have to, like, by train takes around 45 minutes, maybe an hour to get there, which is some commitment. Also, the events itself obviously do take some time, and that just has been difficult in the past. All my friends that I could play with also live even further away, actually, while also the online clients that are available, the unofficial ones, don't really do it for me. Webcam similarly feels kind of like a hassle, and that just means that I really didn't get to play a whole lot. I still kept up with quite a bit of it. For example, this past weekend I actually visited the TCG Grand Slam, where like pros from other card games duked it out in Riftbound, which was pretty cool for the most part. And also, like, with content and card reveals, I also keep up with it a lot, with the tournament results from the regional qualifiers and whatever. I just didn't really get to play a whole lot recently, and that's something that was really a struggle for me, because me personally, with whatever I do, momentum kind of is really important. Maybe that's related to my ADHD, I don't know, but that has kind of been lost in recent times, and just made me realize how important a good online client just is. And let me be clear, we can definitely be sure it's Riot Games, obviously, that we will get an online client eventually. The question is just when. But just having the opportunity, if you're short on time, like if you're quite busy, but maybe have like half an hour, get one or two quick games in, it's just so important. And as a result, instead of Riftbound, I've been playing more Yu-Gi-Oh! And Hearthstone recently, and got back into those a lot more, because I wanted to play Riftbound, but those work better online. What can I say? And so that's quite the important thing, and I feel like, especially for things for people in more rural areas, or maybe even in like less developed parts of the world, let's say, this might be something quite relatable, that's also really important for them. Not everyone has like a game store really close to them, so I feel like this would really do a lot to the game. And even outside of just getting to play, I've talked to a lot of people who would be also just really interested in the online client to like try out decks before you buy them, right? Just getting a deck without fully knowing how it feels and things is quite the ask sometimes, and just being able to try them online would help immensely, in my opinion. Me personally, I would buy a lot more cards if I could try them beforehand. in a little bit more low barrier to entry fashion. Particularly because in Riftbound, I think it's also not that easy to gauge the feel of a deck without actually playing it. Maybe that's just because the game is relatively new and we still don't have like the breadth of experience that we have in other card games, but that's definitely a big issue for me recently, which this solution is quite obvious, and this again will be solved eventually, but I feel like I had to just talk about this first before we get into the actual nitty-gritty, more game design section of things, because maybe this might just even be the largest part of it. Like, whenever I did get to play Riftbound, it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. But like I said, the opportunities have been kind of few and far between, and even beyond that, there are a couple of issues that I still have that I want to get into next. And next up is actually the new sets, Spirit, Fortune, and Unleashed, which I don't even want to criticize the sets in general, like in terms of theming or card design or artworks or whatever. I feel like there's a lot of good there, but the new mechanics they introduced, personally, I feel like that none of the new mechanics is like particularly fun or interesting or innovative, and many of them frankly didn't land quite well. And obviously for singular mechanics, that's not really an issue. Not everything can be good, not everything can be innovative, not everything can be like can reinvent the wheel or really fundamentally change how you think about the game or create like super interesting game states that beforehand there just wasn't anything like it. But if all of the mechanics or if none of the mechanics really achieves something like this, in my opinion, things can get to feel a little bit bland rather quickly, very samey. Like thinking about Spirit Forged mechanics, what was in there, mechs were in there, tribal mechanic has been done to death in so many other card games, also didn't land particularly well in Riftbound. The gold tokens, they're fine. Basically exist just the same way in Magic the Gathering with treasure tokens. Many people I play them with actually just call them treasure tokens all the time, because they are so similar. And in a similar vein, like Repeat, I think is actually a pretty good mechanic, but also like nothing super new or interesting. Twin Spell and Hearthstone comes to mind as something very similar, although not quite the same. And equipment also is also something that exists in slightly different variations in many other card games, but really doesn't bring a whole lot new things to the game. Even though if there are many equipment cards that I really like. GA, for example, is I think quite cool. And yeah, honestly, I struggle to think about more, which might be telling, but yeah, that's just the way it is. And Unleashed, similarly, XP, I think, was something that tried to be a little bit more different, but also it's something that, first of all, again, didn't land well. Like, most of the time, XP is just like a bonus you get from the Scuttle Crab, mainly in Yi with the Yi champion, but well, most decks don't really actively push for them. It's just it's nice if it happens, and you have maybe very few cards that benefit from it. Then the token battlefields or covering up battlefields with the brushes and things like that. This is something that I think is pretty cool to explore. This is a unique space that Riftbound has that few, if any, other card games can explore, so I like the direction, but again, I don't think it landed particularly well, and even if it did, I don't know. The execution just, to me, never really felt super interesting. What else has been there? Reflections, I guess, some new types of tokens, whatever. Ambush is there. Ambush, again, I think ambush is a neat mechanic, but the way you play around it is not too different from like other reaction types, so I also don't think this was anything groundbreaking. And again, not every mechanic has to be groundbreaking, but if none of them are, I feel like, at least to me, things can get boring rather quickly, and I feel like that happened. And this is something that I also talked and thought about a lot, because in the beginning, right after Spiritforge released and even after Unleashed released, at first I felt like this was kind of not going in the direction I like, but honestly, I think it just didn't evolve the game enough in some ways, and this actually then kind of ties into the next issue I have, which is that a lot of the decks, in terms of the aggro mid-range control combo scale, feel rather samey. Like, yes, we have some decks that lean more on the aggressive side, like Annie or Rengar, and other decks that are more controlish, like Kai'Sa and Spiritforged, I think comes to mind. Diana even, or Pike currently is a very good example, that really try to run your opponent out of cards. But in the end, even the slower decks get really punished by missing their 2-drops, which means that they can't really lean fully into one of those sides. Like, you can't be just a super slow control deck, because tempo is so inherently important to the game, which in many ways is a result of how Riftbound is designed fundamentally. Because you can only score 2 points every single turn, being the player that misses the first opportunities to do so while your opponent does is oftentimes difficult to come back from. Like, you can't make up for it by gaining more points later on. The only way to do so is by keep your opponent from actually scoring certain points while you do it yourself, which is possible, but oftentimes rather difficult. Whereas the aggro decks have the issue that due to the rule on how to score the last point, that you can't just do it by conquering, but have to score both battlefields or hold, means that those also need some kind of either top end to actually still be able to put up enough threats later on, or have some kind of unique small combo interaction like Vi Ride the Wind, for example, to actually close out games, which means that all decks kind of get pulled in this in-between mid-rangey kind of style, where some decks might lean a certain way or another, but they are all not that far apart, essentially. There are 2 big exceptions which I could think of, which one is Aurora, which is its own can of worms, just because so much of the power of those decks is concentrated into that singular card. So depending on whether or not the Aurora player finds the card, or how quickly the other player can answer it or finds the answers to it, can really be game deciding. So this is a very, very polarizing kind of strategy, which also many people just don't like. And then the other one is the more recent Lux deck, the Lux combo deck, which actually was also showcased at the TCG Grand Slam in one of the semi-finals by Arne Huschenbeet, and is also, I don't think, not a very good look, because it's just so uninteractive. Like, it's not that I dislike combo decks inherently, but first of all, they are very difficult to balance, in that when the combo is like consistent enough, it's oftentimes too strong, whereas if it just needs 1 or 2 turns more, that might just make the deck completely unplayable. And it's very difficult to kind of find the sweet spot for those decks. And then they tend to lean in those very uninteractive directions, which Lux also kind of does, I think. It just tries to slow down the opponent just enough while cycling through the deck as fast as possible, and being relatively agnostic to whichever the opponent does, and also relatively difficult to interact with, which also is not particularly fun. So it's actually quite important that we have the units that are committing to showdowns and contesting battlefields, because this is where the interesting interaction happens. It just so happens that this makes this kind of asserts a design pressure which to some extent pulls everything in the middle, and I'm honestly not quite sure how to deal with this problem. I feel like the more realistic more realistic way to address the issue of decks feeling rather samey is through more different and unique mechanics that are tied to either the different colors or even legends. This does come with the issue that we obviously need to explore a lot more design space every single expansion if, like, the legends are to be a lot more diverse and unique, but I feel like that's kind of necessary for the game now. Yeah, so those are my thoughts about why I think that I'm growing kind of tired or bored of Riftbound currently, even though there is so much I actually like about the game. Maybe tell me down in the comments what you think about these arguments, whether you are in a similar spot, whether you have other issues there that put you in that spot, and yeah. I hope you have a great day. I hope that if you still enjoy Riftbound, I really don't want to like take that enjoyment from you with this video. I just really wanted to get out my thoughts and maybe hear back about what some of you might think. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.